Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, September the 27th, 2023. So there's a full moon coming up in a couple of days' time. I think it's on Friday. And I want to do a preview of this full moon in this video. Of course, I also want to look at today's astrology, but my topic is going to be this full moon. I'm not convinced that this full moon is particularly impressive. I certainly don't think it's worth making a separate video about this full moon. Nonetheless, it's worthy of consideration. I want to look at the sort of the main themes about this full moon. I also want to consider some of the people, famous people, who this full moon might impact. I came up with 4 people who might be influenced by this full moon. Now, I'm not saying anything is going to happen to them, at least not in a public sense. You know, celebrities, famous people, they have private lives and things can go on in their private lives that they just don't tell us about. So it seems that this full moon has an impact on Nancy Pelosi, also on the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, on the head of the, I forget her title, President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has an impact on her. I think it hits her Venus. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, it hits Meghan. Hits Meghan's Saturn. In fact, it hits her Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So that's what I'm going to talk about. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology for today, which is Wednesday, September the 27th, 2023. Okay, so what's going on? Now, I must warn you, it's not really a very interesting day. Not a great deal going on one way or another. Here we go. There's Wednesday, as usual, set for New York. We can see the moon is in Pisces. The moon is making a conjunction to Pisces, but it's separating. That is kind of good news. The moon in Pisces is supposed to be quite pleasant. It's supposed to be very sensitive, emotional, sympathetic. But when it's conjunct Saturn, that can mean that things get things seize up. We might find that our emotions are just stuck. You think of stagnant pools of water with moon conjunct Saturn in Pisces, or even just mud. But fortunately, this moon-Saturn conjunction is starting to dissipate, and the moon is actually moving on to a sextile of Jupiter. Now, this moon sextile Jupiter is good news. Reason being that moon in Pisces is in Jupiter's sign. Moon is in Jupiter's sign. Jupiter in Taurus is in the moon's exaltation. So we can say that the moon and Jupiter are in a sort of mixed reception by sign and exaltation. Moon being in the sign of Jupiter, Jupiter being in the exaltation of the moon. And yeah, this is good news. It's a good time for starting projects. It's a good time for things connected with relationships. Moon Jupiter certainly Moon Jupiter sextiles. It's one of the nicest aspects in the book. So we can show some warmth, we can show some appreciation, and that should really move things forward in terms of getting on with other people. But as I said, it may be a good time to start something. The Moon-Saturn conjunction is now separating, so, okay, that might mean that you've sorted out all the difficult stuff, all the hard work, and now you can sort of get going on developing new ties, maybe even signing things, particularly now Mercury has been direct for some time, and Mercury is in a good position. Mercury is in Virgo. So aside from that, the Sun, like yesterday, is on the Mercury-Mars midpoint. This Sun on the Mercury-Mars midpoint is going to hang around for a bit of time, and the reason being is because the Sun, Mercury, and Mars, they're all moving. So they're all moving at kind of the same speed. Obviously, Mars is going to move slightly slower. So that means that this midpoint is moving as well. So it's staying in place. And when we look at the full moon, I'll show you that the full moon is on the Mercury-Mars midpoint still. So this is a continued feature of what's going on at the moment. And Mercury-Mars, as I explained yesterday, I think, is about verbal aggression, agitation. We've got a lot to say. We're in arguments. Ripping people to pieces with the power of our verbal invective, at worst, perhaps. And so we shouldn't be surprised if people are quite sharp with language. So that is something to consider. Mercury also is, there's a Sun, there's a Saturn. Mercury's Mercury's square the Sun-Saturn midpoint. All things being equal, that's not great. The Sun-Saturn midpoint is about restriction, restricting one's energy, restricting one's powers of self-expression. And so when we try to talk, when we try to communicate something, we may find that we're up against some kind of barrier, some kind of hurdle. And this actually might provide a context to the Sun on the Mercury-Mars midpoint. We may feel that in order to make ourselves heard, we have to use extra energy. It's not enough to whisper. We have to shout, because if we don't shout, no one's going to hear us. We have to shout to get through the blocks, to get through all of the frustrations and so forth. But I'm not really saying that we really have to shout. I should also point out that Venus is making a square to Uranus. Now, this square is not quite exact. It's going to be exact, I think tomorrow, sort of day after. So it's not all the way there, but we're probably starting to feel its effects. Venus is a planet of relationships, can be about money. Uranus is a planet of the unexpected. So in terms of relationships over the next few days, there may be sort of unexpected events, for better or for worse. Okay, it could be sudden meetings, but it could be sudden explosions. Suddenly someone getting annoyed out of the blue. And I'm not just talking about romance, any kind of relationship. It can also be about falling in and out of love very quickly, passing affections. So do watch out for that. Before I move to the I Ching, I just want to show you something that some astrologers don't just use the geocentric the geocentric solar system. This chart is geocentric. In other words, we're doing it from the Earth's perspective, as if we're on the Earth. But Yeah, some astrologers actually use a heliocentric chart. Now, I don't think very many astrologers use a heliocentric chart, but I think particularly astrologers interested in stock market movements, maybe the astrology of sort of politics, world events. It's always a good idea to keep one eye on the heliocentric solar system. So let me just show you this chart for today, but in a different way. There you go, almost. That is the positions at noon today, New York, but using the heliocentric positions of the planets. So you can see that the sun has disappeared, and this thing here is the Earth, and the sun is here. So actually, from the sun's perspective, the Earth is not in Libra; it's actually in Aries. Now, I don't think there's anything too dramatic going on in a heliocentric sense, except that Mars is moving into Aries. And I was sort of reading one of the reports of an astrologer who I think was associated with, who was more interested in the stock market, and he seemed to look at planet ingresses when Mars changed sign. So, we know that geocentrically Mars is in Libra, but in a heliocentric world, Mars is in Scorpio. Mars has just gone into Scorpio heliocentrically. In fact, today Mars goes into heliocentric Scorpio. So, I would invite you to look around you today. What do you think that means? Is there any sort of uptick in aggression, perhaps, with Mars going into Scorpio? Traditionally, Mars rules Scorpio. Does it rule Scorpio from a heliocentric perspective? I don't know. I mean, that's something to experiment. But you can see from a heliocentric point of view, Mars is moving towards a trine of Saturn. So maybe this is a good time to sort of organize ourselves, focus our energy. But it could be a time of heightened aggression around the world, because the heliocentric chart isn't really so personal. It doesn't put the Earth where we're standing in the middle. It puts the sun there. So it is quite impersonal. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at it. So what I want to do now is I want to look at the 12 signs of the zodiac, and I want to do my forecasts for the 12 signs. So let's get going. Okay, these are my forecasts for today, which is Wednesday, September the 27th, 2023. Aries, there is a change in the air, but really it has been brewing for some time. Things that worked in the past have lost their shine, and you now have to adopt new strategies. It's about being more subtle and not responding to the first thing you see. And sometimes it is better to say nothing, at least in the short term. Taurus, you start to get a feel about what you want, but straight away you see the problem. It's not going to be easy, and you might have to make some sacrifices. So you have to ask whether it's really worth it. There are no absolute answers, and you'll have to weigh up the pros and cons of making a big shift in your life. But in the end, I think it'll be pretty obvious what you need to do. Gemini. It's a Wednesday, a day that's ruled by Mercury. So you'll be able to think clearly and also project your power into the achievement of business and career goals. But you do have to be very disciplined. After all, the moon is still making a tough conjunction to Saturn in a high-profile sector of your solar chart. Good for hard work, but not so good for lazy relaxation. Cancer. You know that nothing is easy, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be a bad day. If you can bring the visions of your future down to earth, you can make solid progress, and this progress may well have a spiritual dimension. In terms of relationships, it can be an excellent day, provided it is the other person making the decisions. But if you want to be free, then maybe you should stay single, at least for today. Leo, nothing is simple, and if you want to get anything done, you'll have to think outside the box. People won't respond to the normal prompts, and ideally, you'll understand what makes them tick on an emotional level. But once you've developed the right approach, you'll start making a powerful impression. Virgo. People often think that relationships are wonderful and that romantic bliss is the supreme state. Yet, with the moon still making a conjunction to Saturn in Pisces, your opposite sign, this may not be true. Where there's a partner, where there's an obligation, there's a restriction. Love is an anchor, though, and you also need to realize that it might be a millstone round your neck. Libra. There is work to be done, and it might not always be to your taste. Doing things out of obligation that seem a million miles from your own core desires. But nothing is wasted. There are things that had to be done, and you're clearing the path for future gains. Yet, whatever you're doing, make sure you're wearing a comfortable, well-fitting pair of shoes. Scorpio. Try to do something fun that other people can also enjoy, in particular partners and lovers. Because when everyone is enjoying themselves, it's so much easier for intimacy and trust to take root. The only problem might be that you'll take the whole thing too seriously, so much so that you lose the moment. Sagittarius. Your first priority is to ground yourself, making sure that everything is secure and predictable and putting yourself in a position where you're never too far from your home base. Then you can start doing things that advance your agenda and boost your luck. And that means small, constant steps, carefully considered. Capricorn. There are things people need to know about, and it's your job to pass on the message. It may not be something you want to do, but it is necessary, perhaps from a selfish point of view. For example, if you're looking for new opportunities, but also in terms of public safety and well-being. The things you read, watch, and study really matter. Aquarius. If you think about it, the situation isn't too bad. You've got a lot of things sorted out, and you do have a sense of purpose, even if you think you're a long way from completing your goals. And with the moon making a fortunate aspect to Jupiter, you can take active steps towards improving your financial prospects. Pisces. You're in control, and there's not much that you miss. So consider everything going on around you and work out the best way of responding to it. And be ready to take sudden initiatives that are not so much dramatic as being timely. A quick phone call, perhaps, or maybe some short, impromptu travelling. So let's now move to the I Ching. So, as always, I threw 3 coins in the air, and I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for people watching this video? And, just a reminder that if you don't want to know what today's going to be like. You don't have to. You can stop watching this video if you want. Indeed, if you stop watching this video, what I say with the I Ching doesn't really apply to you, because it's the people who are watching, who are listening to this reading. So you always have a choice. I should say that when you are with predictions, you always have a choice. You should never have a prediction or a forecast forced upon you when you don't want it. So the first hexagram I threw was hexagram 46, pushing upward. And this is about general progress. We are moving forward with our plans. We're getting recognized in a small way, but we're certainly moving in the right direction. And there is a sequence to this. To begin with, right now, we're at the beginning of a cycle of growth. We're starting to make progress. We might not have yet seen that progress, but we're getting there. And we keep moving. There will be a couple of false starts. I mean, that's always going to happen. This line here, the third line moves, and Wilhelm's translation of I Ching talks about pushing upwards into an empty city. So maybe our first attempts to get something done are not going to be great. I suppose I don't know, in terms of capturing a city, perhaps we push upwards, maybe we tunnel underneath, and we come out of a tunnel and we find nothing going on. I suppose it's like those, all those Second World War stuff, where with people trying to tunnel out of prisoner of war camps, and the idea is that you're supposed to tunnel outside the fence and then run away. But I suppose you tunnel and then you come up and you realize you've come up on the wrong side of a fence, and you're kind of where you started. So there will be some false starts. And then the fourth line moves, and that suggests there's going to be genuine achievement. We're going to really get what we want. So short term, there is some success coming up here, and constant activity, not being put off by the odd mishap. And then this hexagram 46, it moves. It moves to something kind of completely different. This is a hexagram we've had recently had, and it moves to hexagram 54, the marrying maiden, and I'm just wondering what this might mean. I think it's how people respond to our success. So if we've been successful, people respond to us. I mean, we're more popular when we're successful, isn't that right? So if we do something right, people want to know us, and that's great. But some of the people who want to know us may not be people we actually want to know. The marrying maiden represents symbolically a young woman who's quite happy to get married very easily. She comes into someone's household, not a problem, and then once she's there, that's when the problems start. So when you are making progress, consider how people are responding to your progress, because some people, they might be overly enthusiastic. They say, "Oh, you're doing great," and that might indicate that someone's trying to flatter us, to get into our good books, to sort of get close to, get really close to us, and this person may not be someone we want to have anything to do with. Because once they become part of our life, they may be very difficult to get rid of. So the I Ching is suggesting keep your focus, but watch out for other people. Watch out for, it's not just about romance. It's about people offering maybe business services, offering, offering things that cost money. So if you get a phone call and someone wants to be our friend and has something to sell us, probably a good idea to put the phone down. Anyway, that's the I Ching. I don't think it's too bad, provided we're on our guard and we don't trust people, particularly people who are overly friendly. So let's go back to the astrology. Okay, so let's look at today's full moon. Sorry, not today's full moon. This is a preview. This is a preview of the full moon that takes place on Friday. So London time, this full moon is at 10:57 a.m. So if you're in New York, it will be 5 hours earlier at 5:57 a.m. If you're in Australia, New Zealand, it's going to be a lot later in the day, very much towards the end of the day. Now, I don't think this full moon is a big deal for most of us. It's not tremendously exciting. How do I know that? Why do I say that? It's because if you look at the full moon in Aries, 6 degrees Aries, Sun 6 degrees Libra. It's not aspecting anything. It's not connected with the rest of the chart. The full moon is about how things are brought down into Earth, brought down to Earth. I suppose it's a bit of a gateway. I talked about the equinox as being a gateway, but full moon is a gateway, a mini gateway. Still, we can say a few things about it. Firstly, I suspect this full moon will last 2 to 4 weeks, maybe only 2 weeks. So I'm talking about something that's going to have an impact between now and early October. Full moons in general are about a realization. We can see things, the way they are. And the delusion and the fantasy kind of gets stripped away. So we might uncover things which we don't really want to know. There's also a clash between two ways of working. Normally, when you describe a full moon, you describe the sign of the moon, not the sign of the sun. So you say, this is an Aries full moon. That means you've got the sun in Libra, moon in Aries. And so you have with this full moon, you do have a clash between the Aries, between the sun in Libra principle and the moon in Aries. So, sun in Libra, many of us, want a quiet life. We want to be friends with everyone. But the moon in Aries is challenging us. It's saying, no, you can't be friends with everyone. We are being kind of challenged to take the initiative. And there's a contradiction here. If you want to be friends with everyone, if you want to fit in with society, you can't be overly assertive. But you kind of have to be if you want to make progress. So you kind of have to balance these two things, and so that's the main thing going on. Now, one way of looking at a full moon is to look at the midpoints it's on, and what I've got up here is I've got the midpoint tree of this full moon, and so we can see that the full moon is on two midpoints. It's on the Neptune Kronos midpoint, and it's on the Mercury Mars midpoint. This chart doesn't actually show the hypothetical planets like Kronos. I think you have to take my word for that. But you can certainly see that the full moon is on the Mercury Mars midpoint, very closely on it. I've already talked about this, and I think that Mercury-Mars midpoint is very much going to colour this full moon. So I think this full moon is about being in a situation where we really have to assert ourselves verbally. But that's the challenge. If something's wrong, we have to say. We have to. We have to be clear about it, because full moon is about a situation which has reached peak. It can't. The situation has reached a stage where we have to say something. And I think that's going to be what we're going to experience over the next couple of weeks. It may be how we respond to the full moon. It may be how other people respond to it. When people realize the truth, and the full moon is often about the truth, they can be very angry. Now, I think that anger is not going to be physical. I think it's going to be verbal. When the penny drops, people may think, yeah, I have to say something. Of course, it may work in other ways. We live in a society that is very biased against introverts. People who don't say anything just get ignored. And so, if we're an introvert, yeah, I'm a bit of an introvert. You're being challenged to say something. Make a call, express your feelings, because something's not right, and no one's going to take any notice of you if you don't say something. And I think that might be the challenge of the Mercury-Mars. But don't just say something for the sake of it. Full moons can be very unstable. You move from Sun to Libra, Aries, trying to compromise. Then all of a sudden, just blasting forward, saying whatever's on your mind. So there is that back and forth, and so don't just say the first thing that comes into your head, because it might, the words might just come out as being really clumsy. So you got to you got to sort yourself out, work out what you're going to say, and then say it. And that may be a way to bring something to a head, get your grievances out into the open, and that should make life a lot easier. Now, there's also the Neptune-Kronos midpoint. As I said, Kronos is a hypothetical planet. Kronos is a hypothetical planet which is associated with government, with authority figures. Neptune-Kronos is about authority figures, governments. It could be your boss. Even in a family setting, it could be the head of the family, whoever that might be. But, probably more reasonable to think about governments, bosses, that kind of group, authority figures in general. They might be confused. They might just not really know how to act properly given the information in front of them. And so authority figures are capable of making huge mistakes on the basis of false information, or on the basis of information they don't understand. And with the full moon, it may become very apparent that authority figures are making mistakes. But there's another manifestation, and Neptune is a planet of deception. So governments are going to be very deceptive over the next few weeks. They're going to come, they're going to come up with all sorts of stuff. Now, because the full moon is on the Neptune-Kronos midpoint, it may be that those deceptions will be revealed. We will see the truth of the matter. So that's something to consider. Now, as far as looking at this full moon, Friday's full moon, in a geographical sense, I just want to quickly do the astrocartography, which is just looking at where on Earth this full moon hits. don't take this too seriously. Astrocartography is a bit hit and miss, for one thing. For another thing, this full moon is quite weak, and we don't want to overinterpret this full moon. So let's just look at the places where the full moon is on the MC-IC axis. Now, one place, maybe you could see it's going through the Pacific Ocean, Hawaii. Maybe something going on in Hawaii, maybe to do with the fires, a revelation perhaps about how the fires were started, or that might those, I forget those fires. I can't remember the place, but that fire in Hawaii where a lot of people were killed and we got full moon on it. So in Hawaii there could be revelations about maybe how people made mistakes and how the fire was unnecessary or something like that. That's one way the full moon could work. Moving to the other side of the world. I mean, by the way, you see, if you look at this full moon line, which is here, you see, it goes through Alaska, but it just goes through Pacific, just goes through thousands of miles of Pacific doing nothing, except it is just close to Honolulu, which is there. On the other side of the world, this full moon impacts, it does go through Ukraine, it does go through Belarus, it goes through, looks like it goes through Romania, Bulgaria, so, I think, where's that? That's Sudan. So those are the places where there might be a certain realization about the way things are going. So we could, with this full moon, we could relocate it. This is located for London. Okay, it's not great for London in the sense that you've got Saturn on the IC. So Saturn on the IC in a national chart, maybe issues around homelessness that may hit the news or something like that. I don't know, but I suppose issues about homelessness are always hitting the news, aren't they? So if we relocate this chart, let's relocate it. I've already got that set up. So if we relocate this chart for Kiev, we see that the full moon is on the midheaven in Kiev. The full moon is about realization. It's seeing the truth. The midheaven can be about government, and so this full moon hitting a midheaven in the chart for Kiev could perhaps that's a realization about the way the war is going, and that full moon is on the Mercury-Mars midpoint. And as we know from Ukrainians have got a lot to say at the best of times. So we can expect Ukrainian publicity and propaganda organs they're going to go into they're going to go into complete overdrive with hitting with that full moon on the Mercury-Mars midpoint. All sorts of stuff look out for thousands, perhaps millions of words coming out of Kyiv to explain what's going on. Okay, so I want to finish by looking at a few personalities who may be impacted by this full moon. Let's start with Nancy Pelosi. So Nancy Pelosi, this is her horoscope. And you can see that Nancy Pelosi is an Aries. So her sun is at 6 degrees 1 minute Aries. So this full moon is exactly on her sun. I actually think that might be quite a big deal. She might realize the truth of the situation. The sun would represent, because the sun is a male planet, that might represent her husband and what he's doing. we may never know how that's going to work out. But I think that full moon could be quite difficult for Nancy Pelosi. She's going to perhaps see the truth about something, or perhaps people are going to see the truth about her. But yeah, I do think that the first couple of weeks, at least, the first couple of weeks of October, could be difficult for her, and she's going to have to deal with some hard truths. So someone else, Olaf Scholz, Chancellor of Germany. He's got his Mars at 5/12 Aries, so this full moon is on his Mars. I suppose Mars is about aggression, could be about the war in Ukraine, realizing the reality of a war in Ukraine and the reality of Germany's contribution to it, and Germany having to send all this stuff out. But it may not be about the war. Mars is about assertion. Olaf Scholz has Mars in Aries. He may not be able to assert himself politically as much as he would like, and he might have a certain sense of powerlessness there. So that's something to consider. Then there is Ursula von der Leyen. Now, she has got her Venus. Well, I don't have a time of birth for Ursula von der Leyen. But if I take her noon position, she's got her Venus at 5:56 Libra. Again, may say something about her personal life, having a full moon on that. So we may see nothing about it. We may see absolutely nothing. Although she is, I was sort of kind of a representative of what Europe is. Venus can be about diplomacy, how you relate to the outside world. Full moon on Venus, perhaps realizing how much Europe has sort of alienated itself from certain places, particularly as Ursula von der Leyen in her natal chart, she has got she's got a progressed Venus-Saturn. She's got a progressed Venus-Saturn conjunction at the moment. I already looked at that. Hold on, let me just show you what I mean. If we progress her chart, because she's 64 years old, if we progress her chart. If we progress her chart 64 days, so we look at 64 days after she was born. So let's just see. Sorry. Okay. So yeah, there is Ursula von der Leyen's progressed chart. So 64 days after she was born, December the 12th, 1958. She's got a exact Venus-Saturn conjunction at the moment. And, when I talked about her chart, I suggested there might be an issue with diplomacy. So, and realizing that Europe really has messed up in its relations with the rest of the world. Not just sort of G7 countries, but Russia, China, and so forth. So that was her progressed chart, and I kind of feel that this full moon on her Venus is kind of echoing that theme. So I think her Venus is under pressure, and because she's kind of head of the EU, that suggests that the EU's relations with the rest of the world are under pressure, and you might be seeing that over the next fortnight and longer. Finally, I want to look at the horoscope of Meghan. There is Meghan. Meghan as in Harry's wife. Meghan has got her Saturn at 5:52 Libra. She's got her Jupiter at 6:41 Libra. So it's a real powerhouse, that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. It's very much who she is. I think it's actually quite fortunate, her Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Saturn works very well in Libra. It's exalted in Libra. So it's very much who she is, and she's a representative of of a generation of people who've got that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And then so this full moon is on her Saturn. And so I'm thinking, I'm thinking she might have a realization that she's perhaps getting something wrong. That if she really wants to use her potential, she's going to have to do something a bit different. And so that full moon could be quite challenging for her. Will it have any impact on her relationship with Harry? Not necessarily. It may be more about her work, and she might feel that she has to really do something different. She may actually, because Jupiter-Saturn is so connected with the business cycle and society at large, if I was advising Meghan, I would probably say, look around you, open your eyes, look beyond your immediate environment. Look at the way society is heading, Meghan, and you've got to align with yourself with it, because right now you're probably not aligning yourself with it, and the full moon will show her, in some respects, that she's out of date. That she's really moving in directions that are not in tune with society, with the changing world, and she's got to address that pretty quickly if she doesn't want to be obsolete. Anyway, those are a couple of famous people who are impacted or might be impacted by the full moon. Anyway, this full moon, 2 days time, so that's my preview. Anyway, thank you for listening. Hope you found that all of some use, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.